Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to my Python crash course for beginners. Now, I did a crash course about a year ago, and we used the Eclipse IDE. And what I've always hated about that video is the unnecessary amount of time that I took just to set up Eclipse. It was like 12 minutes or something like that. And I wouldn't even suggest using Eclipse anymore. We're going to be using VS Code, which is what I use for virtually everything I do. I also missed some things, and it just could have been a better video. So we're actually going to just jump right into it. And what I'm doing is using the Python sandbox, which is actually from my Django course on Udemy. I'll put a link in the description if you're interested in that. And if you look in here, and the link to this is in the description to this repository. So we just have a bunch of starter files for certain things we'll be looking at, like strings, functions, classes, and they basically have nothing in them but maybe some comments, and we're going to add to these as we move along. So you might want to download the sandbox and go ahead and open it up in VS Code or whatever text editor or IDE that you're using. So as you can see, I already have all the files open here, and we're going to be starting with variables.py. So you can go ahead and open that. Now, obviously, you need to have Python installed so that your system can interpret the Python code. So you need to have Python 3, which you can get from python.org. Just go to downloads. I'm on a Mac, so I would just click here. If you're on Windows, you can download the installer. So you just want to get that installed and then open up a terminal. VS Code has an integrated terminal that I'll be using. And if you say Python -- version on a Mac, you're probably going to see Python 2.7, which is not what we want to use. Once you install Python 3, if you say Python 3 -- version, you'll see either 3.7 or whether it's a later version or whatever, as long as it's version 3. If you're on Windows, you'll probably see version 3 with just Python. Okay, so whatever is version 3, that's what you want to run your files with. So let's clear this up and we'll get started. So this variables.py, we're going to go over a couple things. We're going to go over how to define variables, some of the rules, and also data types, okay? Because just like with any language, there's a bunch of different data types. We're only going to look at the more common ones. There's others that aren't used very much. I'm not going to get into. This is a crash course. But basically, a variable is a container for a value, which can be various types. And if you know any other language, I'm sure a lot of you guys know JavaScript. If you've been following my channel, you know what a variable is. Okay, so before we talk about variables, though, I just want to quickly look at how to comment in a Python file. And by the way, your Python file should end with a .py extension. So a number sign or a hashtag, whatever you want to call this, this is how you can do just a regular comment, just a single line comment. These triple quotes, whether single or double, these are called docstrings, and they're often used to define functions. So you'll see these a lot in function declarations, but they can also be used for multi-line comments, as you can see here. So let's go over some of the variable rules, or the naming conventions. So they're case sensitive. If you create a variable called name all lowercase and name all uppercase, these are going to be different variables. Okay, they must start with a letter or an underscore. They can have numbers, but they cannot start with a number, and that's a very common rule for variables in many different languages. All right, so let's start off by creating some variables. So I'm going to create one called x, and I'm going to set it to 1. And now in Python, there's no semicolons. So if you're coming from JavaScript, even though you don't need semicolons in JavaScript, most people do use them. If you're coming from PHP or Java or any language like that, you're probably used to semicolons. So you might find yourself screwing up a little here and there and putting in a semicolon. I know I still do it. But yeah, no semicolons. Also, when we declare a variable, we don't have to do like var or anything like that. There's no special symbol like PHP. It's just simply the whatever you want as the variable. We also don't have to do like int or anything like that. Now, this is going to be casted as an int by default. So I'm just going to put the variable type here of int. And I'm going to set another variable of y, and I'm going to set that to 2.5. So this is actually a float, okay, or a floating point number. Next one is going to be name, and I'm going to put some quotes here, and we'll say John. And this is actually a string, or an str is the official type. me just put these. I want to make this nice and neat just so you guys can have this as a reference later on. And I will have the finished version in the GitHub as well. And by the way, strings can have single quotes or double quotes, but I prefer single. And let's do is cool, and we'll set that equal to true. And this is a Boolean or a bool. Okay, now it's important to know that with Booleans, you want to have a capital T for true or a capital F for false. If I do that, it's going to be looked at as a variable called true, which doesn't exist. Okay, so those are the main types that you'll be dealing with. So there's an easier way. If we want to declare all these variables, we can actually do a multiple assignment. So let's go ahead and say multiple assignment. And again, I'm going to put a lot of comments in this code in the sandbox just so you guys have it as a reference. So let's say we want to do exactly what we just did above. We could say x, y, name, and is cool. And we could set that to a set of parentheses, and then we can put the values. So 1 and 2.5, a string of John, and a Boolean of true. So this line here does exactly what we did up here, only it's more compact. Okay, so let's go ahead and output something. So in Python, we have a function called print that we can use. Now, if you've ever used Python 2, you might see something like print hello. In Python 3, you want to make sure that you use parentheses. Okay, so we want to go like that. So if I run this file by saying Python 3 and the name of the file, which is variables.py, we get hello. Okay, if I want to output one of these variables like x, we'll go ahead and run that. We get 1. We can also output multiple things, so we'll do x, y, name is cool, and we'll run that, and you can see it will output all of that stuff. All right, and of course we can do most of the stuff that you can do in any other language, like for instance basic math. I could create a variable called a and set it to x plus y. And if we wanted to add a on the end of this print right here and run that, you'll see we get 3.5. Now we can also check the type. So let's say we wanted to check the type of x. We would do let's do a print. And in here we're going to use the type function. So we're going to say type and x. And let's see what that gives us. So it gives us this class int, okay, so the type is going to be in here. Now, there may be cases where you want to cast a different type to a value, like let's say we want to make x, which is an int of 1, let's say we want to make that a string of 1. So we can do casting, so I'm going to set x equal to, and then I'm going to use str, okay, so we can use the type and then pass in whatever we want to turn into a string, which is x itself. And then I'll go ahead and run this, and now you can see that we get class str. If we want to change, let's say y, which is a float, into an int, we could say y equals int, and we'll pass in y, and let's print out y, and let's also, or the type of y, let's also print out y itself. Okay, so what we have now is int, y is now an int, and then we just get 2. Okay, so it went from 2.5 to 2 because an int is a whole number, whether negative or positive. Let's say we wanted to change y back to a float. Okay, so y is now an int of 2. So I'll create a new variable called z, and let's say float, and pass in y, and let's see what we get for the value of z as well as the type of z. And we get a class of float, and the value is 2.0. Okay, it's not going to go back to 2.5 because when we change it to an int, it was then turned to 2, and then we turned it back to a float, so it's going to be 2.0. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So we're going to move on. I don't want this to be too long. I want to keep it under 90 minutes. So we're going to move on to strings. Okay, so let's open up strings.py. And what I really want to go over is like inserting variables into strings. formatting them, and I want to look at some of the string methods and how we call those. Okay, all strings have methods attached to them, and we're going to look at some of those. So let's set a variable up here, a couple variables. One of name, we'll say Brad, and let's do age, which will be an int of 37. Okay, now to concatenate, which means basically to insert a variable into a string, we do that pretty much the same way that we would in JavaScript. So we could say like, hello, my name is space, and then we'll put a plus sign just like we would in JavaScript. And then if we run this with Python 3 strings.py, we get hello, my name is Brad. Now, let's say we want to put the age in there as well. So we would concatenate back to a string, and I am space, and then we'll put a plus sign in the age variable. And let's see what happens when we run that. So we get an error because we can only concatenate string, or str, and age is an int. So what we would do in this situation, if we really wanted to do this, is we would cast this to a string, just like I showed you in the last file. So we just wrap that in str and run it, and now it works. Now there's better ways to do this, to insert variables into strings. So we can do string formatting, and one way is to do positional arguments. So let's say arguments by position, and we're going to say print, and I'm going to put these curly braces in here. Okay, actually, you know what we'll do, let's just do my name is, and then I'm going to put curly braces and then name, and I am age. Okay, and then what we want to do is call the format method. So we do dot format, and then we can set name equal to name, which is this variable up here. Okay, and then we're going to set age equal to the age variable. So these are just basically placeholders. So whatever is in this right here should show up here when we run this. So I'm going to comment this one out and then run the file. And we get the same thing. My name is Brad and I am 37. And notice we didn't have to do any string format casting or anything like that. Now, this is one way to do it. There's another way, and that's using f strings. Okay, now f strings they're only available in Python 3.6 and after. Okay, so if you're using an earlier version, you shouldn't be able to use f strings, but they're pretty convenient. So basically what we can do is just put an f right here, and then put our quotes and say hello, my name is name, and I am age. Now that's all we need, because what's going on is this is an actual variable that's up here. So we're directly putting the variable into the f string, name and age. So if we go ahead, comment that out, and run this, we get hello, my name is Brad and I am 37. All right, so pretty easy, and this is very similar to JavaScript template literals, only instead of using backticks, we just put an F right here in front, and we don't use the money sign like that. Okay, I'm going to be making a lot of references to JavaScript because I know, that's mostly what I do on my channel, so I know a lot of you guys are JavaScript developers. All right, so let's move on here. I'm going to comment that out, and I just want to look at some string methods and how we do that. So let's set a variable of s, and I'm just going to set it to hello world, all lowercase, and let's say we want to capitalize string. So we can actually use a method called capitalize. So I'm going to do a print, and then all we have to do is take that string and then dot whatever the method is, in this case capitalize. Okay, make sure we put parentheses, okay, because it's a method, which is basically a function. So let's go ahead and save that, and we'll run it, and we get hello world. And notice that the first letter is capitalized.